I'm just waiting for the product release of AirPods that cost $300 and lose themselves automatically.
Hi, everyone. This is Pivot from New York Magazine and the Vox Media Podcast Network. I'm Kara Swisher.
And I'm Scott Galloway. This episode is sponsored by IBM.
So get excited, Scott, because it's a special show with Pivot listeners calling in and asking us their questions on all sorts of topics. We love talking to the people, Scott. I think it's really fun, largely because our fun. Pivot listeners are really smart, two, because it gives us questions we didn't think of, and three, because it forces us to be social.
Yeah, all of those things.
Okay, let's jump right in and get to our first listener call. Hello, caller. We hear you have a fun stat about your Pivot listening. Who are we talking to? Where are you calling from? And what's your question?
Hey there, Karen Scott. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm well. Yes, my name is Felipe, and my stat is that since I am a nomadic designer, have been for about 3.5 years, meaning that I work pretty much everywhere in the world, I have listened to you guys while exploring 27 different countries.
Whoa. Okay. So where are you now? Where are you calling from?
Yes. I am now currently in Bangkok. It is just past midnight,
wow.
so...
All right. What is your question?
So my question is that, a little bit of it could get a little philosophical, but
all right.
It seems
That's okay.
it seems like the general excitement around new technologies and product launches have kind of faded in the last 2 decades. I mean, I remember being on the literal edge of my seat when watching the keynotes for the first iPhone, the MacBook Air when Steve took it out of the manila envelope, the Model 3 launch, and so on. So nowadays, it seems like we watch these new product announcements with either skepticism or just straight up indifference, almost like we've seen so much new tech so frequently for so long that we're a little desensitized to it. So my question is, do you think that it's possible, either at an individual level or collectively, for us to get back to that childlike wonderment and enthusiasm for, new technology that seems to have deflated over time?
That's a great question. I'll start because I was at all those events physically, which it was also exciting to go to them. Let me say it was like a party, especially the Apple ones. Microsoft's were less fun, I'll be honest with you, and Bill Gates wasn't as good on stage. But Steve Jobs presenting was it was magical. It really was. And it was really fun. It was a sense of theater, a sense of show. The products were always cool and you hadn't thought of them. They managed to keep everything under wraps too. That was part of it, is you didn't know what he was going to pull out of his pocket or pull out of a manila envelope. And so the sense of theatricality and the slowness of development. I think in the social media age, when everybody knows everything that's going to happen before it happens, you don't get excited about it. And so I think it's really hard, even if you're like unveiling an invisibility cloak or something like crazy, that people don't feel that same sense of wonder about this stuff. And they're not less magicians than they are just they want to make a lot of money kind of stuff. And so I can't think of a recent product launch that I've been like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I don't know. Scott, what about you?
I'm just waiting for the product release of AirPods that cost $300 and lose themselves automatically. Every day is new product introduction for me based on what my kid tries to convince me to buy him. But I've never really. The thing that always struck me, I was a consultant for a long time, and I stole basically it struck me that Apple basically decided they were a luxury brand and took a page out of the book of fashion shows for high-end couture brands. And basically, I saw Apple product launches, not as product launches, but as fashion shows. And they had hot people, highly choreographed in a beautiful environment. And fashion shows are basically 8 to 12 minutes and exceptionally choreographed. And that's how I thought of that Apple basically decided they were going high-end with vertical distribution and fashion shows for marketing.
What's been magical for you, Scott?
The new AI products, the video products, production products from Google, I thought were pretty interesting. The Gemini stuff, that to me seemed pretty... The AI stuff is pretty dramatic. Well, it's funny. The one place I think that there could be more magic, and he hasn't done it, actually, it's a missing piece from OpenAI. The only thing I've seen is him and Johnny Ive about to blow each other. I mean, talking about their new acquisition, their new partnership. It strikes me that Sam Altman should be throwing a crazy event to just highlight all the unbelievable things that you can do with AI. that'll be I bet that's the next
You think?
arms race in terms of events.
Events. Interesting. I don't know if anyone has the style of Steve Jobs. I mean, what do you think, Felipe? What have you been really excited when you see? I think you just know about it before everything comes out. So there's no wonder. There's no wow. Like when Steve Jobs pulled out, you didn't know what the fuck they were going to pull out of their pockets, right? What have you been excited about?
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, when Steve took out the iPod Nano from his coin pocket, that was just like, I remember gasping audibly in my university when I watched that.
And people did there.
Absolutely. But I mean, you are right with social media and leaks and we always have so many like Photoshop renders, et cetera, before it comes out. So when it finally does, it's like, oh, okay. But it could also be a plateau of technology. Like the last many iPhones have just been, slightly faster, slightly better cameras and whatnot. But I think that Scott is right in that Johnny might actually bring some of that magic to OpenAI, at least I hope.
One of the things that was hard for Tim Cook after Steve Jobs, when he did those shows, he was just the one. And he'd bring out like Coldplay or, whoever the heck he hired, whatever celebrity he hired along with it. And there'd always be a celebrity around with him. But then they sort of, with Tim, because he's not nearly as charming, they brought out all of them, right? And it sort of loses the ensemble thing. And none of them are particularly interesting, right?
True.
And so I went to one recently, and I have to say, I was like checking my phone. It wasn't as like a wow kind of thing. They still are very good on the movies and the way it looked and the way they produced it. It still was beautiful. It just wasn't, I can't explain what it was like to physically be there. It was really an exciting moment. I can't think of any product maybe movies today, maybe.
Yeah, it's funny. I think movie premieres and I think of the auto show was the kind of original big product release, right? And then I have been to a product back in the 90s when I was running Red Envelope, and the only place you could sell products, you're too young for this, Felipe. Kara can tell you about this because she's much, much older than you or me, but the AOL had these big events back in DC, and I remember Steve Case and Bob Pittman announcing their new browser or whatever, and then they announced chat rooms where much middle-aged accounts could pretend their name was Chad and they were surfers or something. But that was the last product kind of thing I went to, and it was fun. It was nice.
I think a lot of the theatrics have gone to politics now, right? And even that's getting tired. But I don't know. Anyway, we really appreciate your call, Felipe. It's a great question when you think about it. It takes me down memory road. It wasn't, used to be more fun. Life used to be more fun. Now you've
Let's hope we can get back
Felipe.
To it at some point. Thank you guys so much. It was great meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you for
thanks,
keep
Felipe.
listening to us across the world. We appreciate it.
Of course, we'll do. Bye, guys.
Thanks. Okay, Scott, let's move on to our next caller. This is a question about parenting and how to navigate conversations around porn. Scott, I'm sick of talking to you about your porn use. Hello, Carrie from Maine. Let's hear your question and welcome to Pivot Live.
Hi, thanks so much for taking my question. I was just curious how you both navigated conversations in your family with your kids about pornography. I've got 2 young boys. We're kind of in the pre-adolescent phase, and my husband and I are trying to figure out how to talk with them about it. Porn is just so much more ubiquitous than it was when we were younger. And I'm just really curious how you guys navigate those conversations.
I can start. Again, as I said, I say, Scott, put down the phone. I think it's difficult. I have 2 boys, older boys. The 3-year-old is not at that point yet. But I did talk to him about it. I was like, it's everywhere. I'd rather not go through your phones, and figure out what you're doing. That's one way of doing it, is monitoring it and putting different strictures on it so that, you can do that through all kinds of, Verizon has a thing. I was mostly with time was the thing I was monitoring more, and actually stopping them from using it as much time. And of course, porn takes time, apparently. But one of the things I did is I just flat out talked about it. I was like, look, there's a ton of porn on here. And not just from just porn sites, kids sending each other stuff. That was one of the things I was much more concerned. A girl sent Louis something, and I was sort of shocked. I was like, I can't, he showed it to me, and I was like, oh dear, that's not, and it wasn't porny. It just was not what I would want my daughter sending, that's for sure. And so I had long talks with him about it and about the usage of it. And I was trying not to be sex negative, but I definitely was like, this is more addictive. It takes your time. It's desensitizing. It's not good for your relationships over a long time. So I just faced it head on. I don't know, Scott, you're in the right age area now for that issue.
Yeah. So, Carrie, I navigated the conversation around the important topic of porn the way the Hindenburg navigated its way into landing in New Jersey. And so the truth has a nice ring to it. My partner demanded that I have the sex talk with my then 14 or 15-year-old son. So I took him to the beach and thought I was going to have this very hallmark moment. And I said, it's time to have the sex talk and I want to talk about porn. And before I even got the words out, he screamed louder than I've ever heard him scream. No. He's like, no, no. And I'm like, it's okay. We can talk about this stuff. And he's like, do we have to? I really don't want. He seemed traumatized by the idea of the conversation. So my entire approach to talking to my sons about sex is I make them watch all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones with me. It's got everything. It's literally got everything. It's got gay people. It's got threesomes. It's got sex. It's got good relationships, bad relationships, bondage.
Oh my God!
Really aspirational gay characters, Prince of Dorne, Pedro Pascal, and then around porn. What I've tried to couch it in other things. I talk about the notion that you have only a certain amount of mojo. I say you have only a certain amount of energy, and you don't want to waste it on bad calories. You have only a certain amount of focus time and attention. You want to spend it on the 2 or 3 things that are most important in terms of your studying. And then I also try and slip in, and also you want to be able to, I said the reason I met your mom, who is much more attractive and much more higher character than me, was I really wanted to meet a woman and I was willing to take risks. And I told my oldest son, if I'd had porn, I'm not sure I would have had that same mojo and fire to want to meet women. And that anything that reduces your mojo and your fire is a courage killer. And what I've said to my boys a bunch of times is that porn is a courage killer because it's on demand. And what Kara says about it being, a terrible facsimile of what you're supposed to expect in relationships. And I say to my boys, and this is what I'm saying, it's good to be horny. Channeling your sexual desire to making you a better man, wanting to make you stronger, dress better, smell good, shower, develop a rap, endure rejection. I'm worried that men are looking for low-risk way to engage in what they see as a relationship with porn and AI. So I try to position it to my boys. You only have a limited amount of time with your boys. You got to keep it consistent and crisp, I find, because they tune me out at least.
Yeah, one of the things that's important to think about, look, it's been around since time immemorial, whether it was magazines and then it was Skinamax, which is Scott's and my favorite station, or whatever, or videotapes. Everyone has tried to get, or going to places, right? Because there were physical places people went. It's not something you can stop. It's sort of the same thing. Don't drink at all. It's just not going to happen. And you yourself, if you've done it, you can't say don't do it. It's very, it's everybody experiments and does stuff like that. I think the very difference is, one, it's much more addictive, it's much more accessible, and it's much more specific, right? You can get anything, right? And so it moves people down a highway of something basic, chalk van straw porn versus something really sick, right? And that's really the problem, is that it can start to get very dark very quickly and very accessible. And I think that's the way I more did it, was I restricted their time, right? You could only be on the phone this much time. And one of the things and it was the time suck is that I thought about more than anything else. And of course, porn is like that, whether, and we make jokes there, I watch it on Threads or Instagram. I watch something called food porn, which is ha ha ha. We do porn, everything. And they just show different restaurant settings and doing cool things. And I watch it. It's quite addictive. The other thing is encouraging them to do things outside of the phone. Again, put down the phone. One of my sons himself, he bought one of those timer boxes that he put the phone in and locked it, and it wouldn't open for 5 hours or whatever it was, which I thought was really, this is something Alex did. I thought that was great because he wasn't getting his work done because it was so easy to fall in. So time is the way I did it versus everyone's going to look at porn, but it is much darker. And I don't know what I'm going to do with Saul when I honestly don't. It's going to be a much different world than my older kids. Carrie, are you going to talk to them soon, or is there an age or do you split it between you and your husband?
I mean, my 10-year-old and I have been
to
very open. We've had lots of talks about, I've tried to just be really open with him about lots of different things, including sex. And I know
at 10.
Well, I mean, yeah,
wow.
Even
they're way ahead now.
They're getting exposed to things so early.
Yeah.
On the bus, on kids who have phones. So I'm trying just to be really preemptive about it and just having those conversations be really open and flexible. But
yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
True story. The other day, my son stole his phone. I knew what he was doing. He steals his phone to go into the bathroom to be on TikTok because we don't like him on TikTok. Mm-hmm. So I started banging on the door and screaming, "Start masturbating." Anyways.
I'm sure that worked really well. Anyway, Carrie, we really appreciate it. Good luck.
Great.
But both you and your husband should be involved. Yeah. It shouldn't just be the guy.
How do you know it's a husband? How do you know it's not a wife? I feel triggered. You're making assumptions.
She said husband. I listened to our listener. Do you have a husband or what?
I don't think of the heteronormative relationships.
She said husband. She said it because I listened to the listeners as opposed to you who are just literally not listening.
Start masturbating.
All right, Carrie, thank you so much, as always.
Bye.
Thanks, Carrie.
You. Thanks. Support for Pivot comes from IBM. Bigger isn't always better, especially with AI. Supersized models can drain your budget fast. Smaller ones are smart and can help cut AI costs up to 90%. Right-size your models at IBM.com. The AI built for business. IBM. Scott, we're back with our special call-in show, taking questions from our listeners. Let's go to our next caller. This question is about AI and career choices. Hi, Jessica. Tell us about yourself and what your question is.
Hi, I live in Houston, Texas. I am a veterinarian and small business owner, and my husband is an engineer for NASA. We have two teenage sons, ages 15 and 13, so they're just starting to think about college and career paths, and we keep hearing how AI and increasing automation is just going to eliminate whole sectors of work and broad swaths of especially entry-level positions. And so I was just curious what advice you guys have for young people who want engaging and fulfilling careers, but careers that are not going to disappear as they move into them.
Yes, it's definitely if you're including current careers. Scott, why don't you start?
I think you want your kids to have a decent grounding in communications and the sciences and history and the same old stuff. Now, do you unnaturally push them towards computer science, as a lot of people were doing, knowing that a lot of those jobs are probably going to go away unless they're naturally drawn to it? Sure. But I don't think we can, I think it's unhealthy to try and predict the future and push your kids one way or the other. I remember in private schools in New York when everyone was forcing their kids to take Mandarin, thinking that China was taking over. And I think removing one of the biggest mistakes we did in public schools was removing civics and wood shop and auto shop and metal shop and replacing it with computer science. And you end up with Mark Zuckerberg and less patriotism and also less young people, specifically young men who have the skills to go get vocational work. But I think what you do is you just encourage your kids to find stuff they're interested in, make sure they have a good grounding or some grounding in, reading, writing, arithmetic, all that stuff. But I think trying to predict the future around what jobs will be there and which ones won't, I think it's a fool's errand. I think you're just as likely to be wrong. And also, we like to think of ourselves as parents, as engineers, that we engineer the sheep. And we're not. We're shepherds. We can decide where they graze. We can point them in one direction. We kind of get some influence on what they eat, but they come to you. Out of nowhere, my son's interested in biology and my other son's interested in technology. And I had nothing to do with either of those things. So I think you're just super supportive, introduce them to a bunch of stuff. But for God's sake, who knows?
I would agree. One of the things that's interesting is, I have two very different older sons. The younger ones are not going to have a job for a while. But one of the things was encouraging them to get a wide range of study. The one that was more interested in technology, I kind of insisted, we both did, that he take, focus on English, focus on language, whatever, sports, other things that weren't necessarily when he was applying for colleges, he applied to a lot of technology-oriented ones. And we were like, well, think larger, that you have other offer. Because he liked to do glass art, for example. He does amazing, like other things. Like he's taking a linguistics course. He's at Michigan, which I was very happy for him to go there because he had a lot of choice. He was doing a thing where he built these really cool floats, but it was a lot of technology, but it was artistic because he had an artistic bent. And so one of the things was sort of not shoving them into anything. Now, in his case, interestingly, he was very aware of the AI issues well before I was. He's like, AI is going to replace all of computer programming. And therefore, he's much more job focused in a great way. But he's like, I'm going to do mechanical engineering because that's something that can't be replaced. So that was him doing it on his own energy, essentially. But one of the things we tried is to get them a wide range of things, even if he tended towards technology, and my other son tended towards English and history. We wanted him to do more maths, like to experience a lot of things. And again, you're right. Scott's right. You don't know what's going to be. Like I was one of those parents that were like, he should learn Mandarin. I'm like, why? Like he's not like but it was a big pressure. Like they're in Mandarin, they're in whatever. I just think if he likes languages, if he likes Chinese, learn Chinese, but otherwise not for a job because you don't know what people will do. I do think we don't know what jobs are going to be affected. But I did tend to push them more into jobs that I did know weren't going to be affected. Like if you like cooking, that's really not going to be subsumed, or vocational. If they happen to like that, that would be interesting. And so I just think the more you give them a broad base of learning, the better you are, and then they'll sort of self-sort into things. But I would say I wouldn't be a radiologist if they I desperately want to be a radiologist, or I desperately...
Just from veterinary medicine, if that field's going to be like...
Right. That said, it means there's going to be vets using that who do better and fewer vets, I guess, if that makes sense. And so I do encourage them to use AI and try it and employ it. Not absolutely, and figure out what it means for you. Because one thing Scott always says, which I think is important, is there's going to be fewer lawyers, but the lawyers that are there are going to do better because they use this technology. It's sort of like not using the internet, kind of stuff. I don't know, anything else, Scott?
Yeah, the one skill, if I could give my kids any one skill and what I push them towards at every chance I get, is I do think the skill that if I had to pick one thing that will persevere and always be important in terms of your ability to advance professionally, it's communications, or specifically the ability to tell stories, create an arc. And I think it starts with a written word. And that is the ability to express yourself and organize your thoughts. And so I make my kids take English and advanced English. And also one of the things I loved about the school they're in, they make them stand up and speak in front of other people. Because when I look at, I think for the last 50 years, and I think probably for the next 50 years, the difference between someone who does well and someone who does exceptionally well is their ability to capture people's attention and take data and create an arc and tell stories and compel people to action through either the written word, and there's so many different mediums now for storytelling, whether it's Substack or the written word or writing
cool
books or in person. But great communicators, I mean, it's very difficult if you want to have an outsized, disproportionate amount of influence or disproportionate amount of economic opportunity, or quite frankly, a disproportionate amount of unearned mating opportunities. It's quite frankly how good your rap is, your ability to engage people. So developing those skills early, I used to have this thing and I stopped because it got too painful with one of my sons, but I used to say when we go out, you can't come back in the house until you speak to a stranger. And one had no problem with it, another did have problems with it. And it would be like, just go pet their dog, ask them what type of dog it is. But your ability to engage people, look them in the eye, establish conversation, I think that's kind of, sort of the building blocks of all of it.
Yeah, one of the other things, I would say he's absolutely right about communication, but creativity too. Creative stuff really does help you, whatever it happens to be, whether it's cooking or glass art, whatever, just something that's physical. One of the things, sports too was another thing, was encourage sports because that's teamwork, that's physical stuff, it's out of your head, because there's these kids are so much in their head and so much on the screen. And so just not insistent, but put down the phone, go kick a ball, go kick a, like that was the thing. Now I was lucky because both my kids liked sports, but like whatever it happens to with my daughter, she likes dancing. Like she's going to go to like dance, do whatever. My other son, I have a feeling, is headed towards martial arts at this point because he likes to kick things. So I'm like, okay, then we're going to do something with it. Let's make it productive. But physicality, I think, is something that is undersung, that is critically important. The other thing Scott does a lot, which I think is, I do a lot in a different way, is taking them to things like theater or sporting events, like where lots of people are. And that's another thing that I think you learn a lot by that. And the last thing I would say is a job. I think kids should work. I just do. I think my son did so well working at she worked at a store, a grocery store, essentially. It was a sort of specialty foods. And I think he learned how to show up on time, show up for a job, finish things, clean up things, and give them that
and it's
responsibility.
More engagement, like Scott was saying, more engagement with just the general public and learning to...
Right. Or figuring out a job, figuring out like a workplace. Yeah. My son has an internship this summer and he's always calling me. He's like, well, this happened. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting, you know what I mean? Like you have to like, and they have to fail, I think, in a lot of ways. I think kids should work at a relatively early age. I did, but I don't know. They'll be fine. You'll be surprised. Everything, as Scott says, you just don't know. You can't second guess it.
Anticipate.
Yeah. Anyway, we really appreciate it. Jessica,
Great.
thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. I enjoyed the show.
Thank you, and good luck.
Jessica.
Thank you. Bye. Up next, we have someone with a question about BYD and China. Tell us your name, where you're from, and your question.
Hi, my name is Kelvin. I live in the Bronx. My question. So I've been thinking a lot about U.S.-China dynamics, especially with tech and automobiles, and you guys have praised BYD's EVs and said that how it will be great if they could enter the U.S. market. But also over the years, you guys have expressed concerns about the CCP's influence, especially with TikTok. What was it, about a year ago? We had the balloon over the Midwest. So my question is, if we are worried about China's social media apps spying on Americans, why would we welcome a tech-filled Chinese vehicle onto U.S. streets? Could this possibly be a way of being like a Trojan horse for data collection and surveillance in America?
That is an excellent question. You know what? I hadn't even thought about that in terms of data collection. The reason why we talk about BYD is because they're really good cars. And what's really depressing, I think, to me at least, and I don't know about Scott, is how incredibly innovative these cars are and how cool and adorable. And we wish there was more innovation with U.S. car makers around. Now, there's been like the Volkswagen, they're not a U.S. car maker, but Volkswagen ID, some of the GM cars are great, some of the Ford cars are great. But it feels like the whole area needs innovation. And so rather than just copying, BYD is innovating with cars. And so that's, I think, what we're in admiration of. But you're right. These things collect a lot of data. They'll have a lot of questions about our movement. We always will have, China's always in a surveillance mode, as far as I can tell. That said, so is Facebook, so is Tesla, so are the rest of them. But you're right. I think it's a little different experience, knowing where people are going in their cars. Is that as much? With TikTok, you're more worried about propaganda, about messaging and things like that over where people physically are. But I suppose you're right. That is something that they could track. I just don't think it's TikTok. I worry more about it as a propaganda more than a surveillance
I was
vehicle.
Thinking by a card, you could tell the size of a family, what podcasts they're listening to. Yeah. Could there even be technology to record conversations? So
yes. Yep. I agree with you. I hadn't even thought about that. As a surveillance vehicle, it certainly is that. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, maybe I should be more worried, but I'm not. I think that we should have the technology to figure out if there's some sort of remote transmission, or data storage technology that ends up in the wrong hands. And also, the surveillance horse is already out of the barn. I think most people or most organizations, if they're really committed to understanding where you are, the relationships you have, your travel patterns, I just can't imagine they couldn't get most of that information probably from hacking Uber or going onto the dark web or hacking, or not even hacking, but just looking at your movements on Meta. And I think there's a bigger difference between take worst case scenario, understanding a family's size and movements, as opposed to training an entire emerging generation of Americans to have sympathy for Hamas. And that's where I see the threat of TikTok. I think the propaganda threat of raising a generation of civic business and nonprofit leaders that are anti-American, which is what I think TikTok, if I were controlling TikTok's algorithm or had influence over it, that's the scale I would be putting my thumb on. I just think cars are less of a security risk. And also, I like the idea of young people having access to great cars for 18 or 20 grand. I want to see...
Or less. Some of those are 8,000, 10,000.
They're incredible. I would love to see... I think tariffs are terrible. I'd love to see a global trade agreement. Our trade complexion with China is asymmetric. There's a lot to be done there, but I think ultimately we want to put pressure on all global auto manufacturers to give our households the best cars for the lowest price possible.
And the most innovative.
That's right. And I think BYD is that. Now, should they be providing more access to our great manufactured goods? Yes. Should they have paid some sort of tax for the IP theft from Tesla and Auto? I mean, it gets complicated fast, but and maybe I'm being naive. I'm not worried. I'm much more worried about ByteDance than I'm about BYD.
Yeah. So one of the things also is that what BYD is doing is they're invading other countries, Europe. You see them. I saw them all over Europe on my last trip. I had not seen BYD cars until recently. One, they're delightful. They absolutely. When I asked to look at one. They're cars I wish I could own. I know it sounds crazy. Like I don't think about China as a car manufacturer, but they're making enormous inroads into other countries across the world, as China is in lots of things. And the idea that China is just a stealer of information they absolutely are. They absolutely do steal IP. But they also are innovators at this point. They've started to flip the script, and they're very innovative. And you can see that they couldn't accomplish what they're doing at BYD by just stealing things, because there's nothing to steal. Like the Tesla hasn't changed its look in quite a while. I don't know, it looks like the same car as 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The price hasn't come down. They haven't offered. Tesla's missed the boat on offering a cheap car, right? They were supposed to, and then they didn't. Same thing with all of them. Is as Scott said, young people don't have a chance to buy these things, and they would proliferate if our car manufacturers didn't just stick up to the top, wealthy people and bring it down. So, obviously, it seems like you should compete on quality and everything else, but it demands that our own manufacturers do the same thing, which I think they have a difficulty doing, and especially with the Trump administration openly hostile to EVs now. I think this new bill is going to remove all the subsidies or encouraging, and they're going to be very fossil fuel oriented. And so that's, again, our country sort of shooting itself in the foot on the emerging technology that is critical, which is EVs. But you're right. It's an interesting question. But I'm also not that as worried as Scott. I'm more worried about a propaganda vehicle than anything else. So any other thoughts, Kelvin?
No. I just was really interested in you guys' conversation about that.
It's a really interesting question. It is an interesting question, but it doesn't matter. They're winning all over the world. I have to say they're everywhere. And so that's the real opportunity for our manufacturers to get all over the world and be innovative, but we're not taking it. And now our government doesn't want to help that happen. Anyway, thank you so much. And we hear you're getting married this month. Congratulations.
Actually, Saturday. My husband and I, we are getting married this Saturday. We're excited. It's going to be at our home.
Congratulations.
So I want to send a shout out to him, Ori, and then also our family in Israel. They were planning to be here, but unfortunately they cannot make it for obvious reasons. So, our hearts are with them, and we'll just maybe find time to celebrate in Tel Aviv whenever all of this is over.
Next year in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Congratulations. We really appreciate you calling in.
Thank you. A pleasure speaking with you both.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Okay, Scott, one more quick break. When we come back, we'll take a final question about time travel. Okay, Scott, we're back. Next up, we have a caller with a question about time travel. Let's bring him in. Hello. Tell us who you are and what your question is, time traveler.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Check one off the bucket list. I'm on with the big dog and the jungle cat. Pretty amazing. So my name is Eric. I live near Philadelphia with my family. I work in the energy industry. And my question for the two of you is, if you had to pick one timeline to go back to in history, what would you choose as that timeline and why?
Oh, wow. Scott, do you want to go first? Or I can, whatever you want. I think about time travel a lot, actually.
Go ahead, Kara.
I am an H.G. Wells fan. I love that book, The Time Machine. And of course, A Time and Again was one of my favorite books as a kid. I love Jean-Claude Van Damme in Time Cop. I love time, all the time things. And I just find Ray Bradbury, obviously, with the butterfly on his foot and stuff like that. So I think about time travel a lot. And I think it would be pretty cool to go back. And the question is, would you do anything and change anything? God, so many different choices. I would like to meet Cleopatra. I gotta say, I'm kind of have a lot of questions. And so if I had to pick a historic figure, that time period, although I'd probably be killed immediately as a witch or something like that. But if I could be invisible or not, know what I know now and go back then, I think that would be kind of cool. I think probably, I feel like she was the greatest ruler for a long, long time and the richest person in the world. And since I know so many richest people in the world, it would be kind of interesting to see that era. I think that would be pretty cool. I probably would go back to see my dad when he was living. That would be the other one. But then would I be my age I was or the age I am now? So if I could know what I'm like now, then that would be cool. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I have no desire to go back very far because I've sort of gotten fond of this whole Novocaine and Netflix age we're in.
Okay.
And I think people wax nostalgic for no reason. I think this is the best day ever in the history of the planet on a risk-adjusted basis until tomorrow. I do think things just get better. And people don't, because we live in a society where algorithms want to convince you that your life is terrible and people are unhappy. It's not true. On almost every major metric, things get better every day. So I don't feel like I need to go back. Where I go to is, I'm not interested in going to a different time. I'm interested in going back to certain scenarios in my life. I would love to go back and spend some time when I had little kids in the house. That was really magical. And I kind of knew it at the time, but I was working so hard that I didn't get to spend as much time with them as I would have liked. So I would love to go back and be with, 4 and 7-year-old boys instead of 14 and 17. So that's how I think of time travel. I don't think of going back based on an era. I think of going back to different points in my life because I want to remember I want to feel that. I want to feel those moments again, but I don't have any desire.
You can do what I did. You could have more kids.
Yeah, I think I'm closed for business, Kara.
Yeah.
I would need to get divorced and go younger, which could happen.
Yeah. I'm just saying. You can experience it all over again.
No, I'm going to rent Saul and
Okay.
Claire.
Okay. Good luck with that. Let's see. There's a great film about that. Also, speaking of time travel films, it's called About Time, and it's
with Christopher Reeve.
No, it's there's time. That's
and Jane Seymour.
That's time and Somewhere in Time. That's Somewhere in Time. Then he goes back and he sees the penny. That's an amazing movie. But there's another one called About Time, and it's with Bill Nye. Is it Nye? Whatever, that great actor. Well, they can go back and redo things over and over again, and Rachel McAdams is in it, and they can go back and they meet for the first time. He fucks it up, and he goes back and redoes it until he gets it right, which is kind of cool to be able to do that.
There was a similar movie called Sliding Doors, but in my opinion, the best modern day movie about time travel was Looper. How about you? Where would you
go? Yeah, where would you go?
Watching Stranger Things on Netflix has made me a little nostalgic for the 1980s. So I'm a Gen X kid.
Best era ever.
Really? So you picked one.
Yeah.
You gave me an answer to that question. I agree.
See.
It was such
No, if I could be, were you I don't know if you're the same age as me. If I just wanted to have fun, I would go back to UCLA in the 80s. I mean, that was hard to beat.
I bet. Yeah.
And, I could, oh my gosh, I could have a good time. I'd finally hang up the condom I never used. Anyways, the 80s. Tom Petty, and Tom Petty.
Yeah,
that
and
would,
hair.
That would be good.
You had hair.
A ponytail. I didn't just have hair. I had a ponytail.
You had a ponytail. Why the 80s for you, Eric? Why the 80s?
It's almost like that ET vibe a little bit. I was a kid on a dirt bike, roaming around neighborhoods. There was a sense of freedom and fun. You know, it wasn't just being a kid, but like there's a lot different than being a kid now. So
Yeah.
a little nostalgic.
Yeah. That's
Where'd you grow up, Eric?
in DC, in Washington, DC, in Northwest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different time, although maybe it isn't for the kids, right? And they may think this is the best time of their lives. They probably do. My kids are carefree in a different way. So we don't know. It'd be interesting to go back with your current personality and knowledge to when you were a kid. That would be kind of
exactly
cool. Like you know shit. You know what I mean? Like it would be, that to me would be cool. I don't know. Still, I'm sticking with Cleopatra.
Let's start a search engine and Mary Lauren Sanchez.
Okay, Scott, that's the show. As always, our listeners are so much smarter than we are. They really are, don't you think? Is that all you have to say?
Yeah, no, I love it.
Anyway.
I love our fans.
All right. We'll be back on Friday with more Pivot. Read us out, Scott.
Today's show was produced by Lara Naaman, Zoe Marcus, Taylor Griffin, and Kevin Oliver. Ernie Intertad engineered this episode. Thanks also to Drew Bros, Miss Vero, and Dan Shalon. Ishak Kuro is Vox Media's executive producer of podcasts. Make sure to follow Pivot on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for listening to Pivot from New York Magazine and Vox Media. You can subscribe to the magazine at nymag.com/pod. We'll be back later this week for another breakdown of all things tech and business.
We didn't even say we'd go back and kill Hitler, did we? That's the old go-to, right? I think we all would do that.